All right, John Falbo, welcome back. We have video number 7 for our viewers this week in our series, Stop the Insanity, Underground Secrets for Parents to Dominate the Junior and College Tennis Process. And in this installment, this video, we are talking about educational fit.
Yes, Lisa, and thank you again for having me. I love what we're doing here. This is great. And we talked about this in the last video too, when you brought up different schools, Division 1, 2, 3, NAI, etc. And we talked a lot about the educational part of it, and I'm looking forward to continuing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, obviously we're talking about college tennis. It's not tennis college, it's college tennis. The players are referred to as student athletes, student coming first. And so the educational piece has to be an integral part of the decision-making process.
Yes, and I can relay to everybody listening. When I came to college, I was an athlete student, and it was tennis college for me, and even as such, there's no way you can play if you don't keep a certain grade point average.
That's right.
You have to go to summer school. I had to go to summer school, and there's just, because in my own personal situation there were so many flaws in the choice itself. If you start to get behind educationally and you start to experience confusion with your teachers, with your advisors, even with classmates, the whole process becomes far less enjoyable.
Well, and let's be real. For most of these kids, a professional tennis career is, I mean, it may be a dream for them, but at some point, they are likely going to make their living somewhere other than on a tennis court.
That's correct. And even if you don't consider tennis ability, because that's the hardest thing, because there are a ton of good players out there on Division 1, 2, and 3 level. Some of them aren't even in college yet. There's a ton of good players. And if you're assessing on tennis ability, that's one thing. Can people play at the pro level? There's a lot of people that can play at the pro level. Problem is, when you start talking about needing $250,000 to go out and really have someone with you and have a fighting chance over 2, 3, 4 year process, that's just not a commitment or even a reality for many players and families. It's just not. And so when you get into the economics of the situation, 95, 99+% of people going to college are going to be making their living in a different sector in life other than playing tennis professionally. They might go into tennis as coaches. They might go into tennis in a number of different ways.
Sure.
But in terms of really investing, the pro tour is no big. There's guys in the top 100 in the world that are not even breaking even. They're paying $300,000 a year for a physio, a coach, travel expenses, everything. There's guys in the top 100. I get messages from them like, "This is not what we thought it was, man. This is crazy." There's women in the top 80 that are losing money. So I think everyone recognizes it's not a real viable choice versus going to college and or masters and or further your degree or starting a business and going out in the world and making a way for yourself and your family. So when you break it down economically, you're absolutely correct. And so if that's the case, why on earth wouldn't you go and put hierarchically number one priority on making sure my classes are right, making sure my professors are good, making sure my advisors were on the same page, and really executing in that regard?
Right. And when we talk about educational fit, we're talking obviously about quality of education, but there are a lot of pieces that go into that puzzle. So, for example, there are kids that have come up through junior tennis who have done virtual school or homeschool, and some of those programs, I don't want to get into a debate over the value of virtual school versus brick and mortar. Some of those virtual programs are top notch and really offer an incredible education, but others don't. And we have to be honest as parents about the level of middle school and high school education and the rigors of that process that our child has experienced, and understand what they're going to be able to handle when they're off on their own, trying to combine the rigors of a college education with the rigors of playing a sport at the collegiate level.
Absolutely. And I've talked a lot about the program here at Kansas and KU, and one of the biggest things I've told the advisors here and the different academicians, if you will, and it's like, look, we need to be honest with the student athletes. You can market yourself as a research facility, you can market yourself as all of these different things to try to appear what it is. But at the end of the day, when someone's looking at Duke, or someone's looking at Stanford, or someone's looking at what would be perceived as a top-notch academic school, and they look at Kansas, it's not that Kansas is worse. It's that there's not the standard of excellence that's there. There's not the same perception. So the minute you start offering that and trying to compete with that, you appear, number one, disingenuous. And number two, you're not going to be able to live up to your end of the bargain, because you're not going to match up with the students who are the best fit for you. This was about 2 years ago that I had this conversation. They started a program marketing abroad as well as in this country. And they found a whole niche of Chinese students that did not want to go to Stanford, that did not want to go to Duke, that wanted to come where the rigors were less so in terms of classes, and they still got a quality education, but they didn't feel like the same kind of pressure. And this is not a Chinese phenomenon. This is, people are people. And if you're honest with yourself as a parent, and if the child is honest with themselves, they know deep down what level of commitment and also what level of tolerance they have for academic rigors.
Right. And again, talking about educational fit, it's not just about necessarily the quality of education, but also the way in which that education is delivered to the student athlete, right? Yes. So if my child picks school A, what are the class sizes? How much access does my child have to his or her professors, or is everything done through teaching assistants? What kind of office hours are available? Is everything done virtually, or will my child have an opportunity to sit down face to face and get assistance if they need it? And these are questions you have to ask if you are going to find the right fit educationally for your kid. There's nothing worse than getting into a situation and your child realizing, they've come from this small, maybe private school, high school environment where everybody knows everybody and everybody's looking out for everybody, to going to a giant state university in these giant lecture halls where you're basically watching the lecture up on a big screen and feeling like, nobody's there who cares about me. Nobody is interested in making sure I have success here. And so it's important to understand that. And, we've talked in earlier videos, John, about this whole notion of the tennis team providing tutors and that not every tennis team does that. Not every school has the budget to provide tutors or has the interest in providing tutors. They'll leave the students up, on their own to go get that additional help if they need it. And it's important to ask that question.
Oh, yeah. And, with the advent of so much online learning, it's even more important, because if you get isolated as a student athlete and you're doing all of your classes online and you have no tutors, and then you're not, your practice schedule is not as rigorous or intense, as a student athlete, you can start to feel on an island. And that's the worst. That's the worst. You want to be, there's online classes that you want to take for expediency, but you want to be going to some classes. You want to be going to plenty of practices and fitness, if for no other reason than the social aspect of saying, hey, that I personally privately schooled my son Paul, and there have to be, he goes to the gym every day, and some days he doesn't feel like working out, but a lot of his friends are at the gym, and some of them are in school and some of them are not, and he gets all kind of age ranges. But if he didn't go to the gym and he didn't do some of the other social things that he does, and he was on an island, either class-wise or socially, etc., it just wouldn't be healthy. So
Right.
you don't have to go to school to have social benefits, but they need to be like, every student athlete needs to be going to practices, going out to eat, hanging out in study halls or in classroom scenarios. And like you say, they need to feel like they're not one in like an auditorium of 6,000 people where there's a TA and the professor's not even there half the time, and they basically feel like a number.
Well, and for some student athletes, that works, right? It goes back to this whole notion of being honest with yourself, being able to assess what makes you tick and what makes you thrive, and then finding the college situation that fits that, which is, this is why we're doing these videos, John, is to help parents understand and to help the student athletes or the prospective student athletes understand the questions that they need to be asking and the factors that should be going into this huge decision-making process.
Oh yeah, and even here, with some of the girls on the team, I've noticed the girls that don't mind the large class settings, they have other small settings in their social sphere that they can go and feel heard, and they can go and feel a part of a small group as well as a big group. We as human beings, we have all different kinds of needs. And so, yeah, we need to be, it's not a bad thing to be a part of a large group, but even the girls that love the large groups of maybe a class of 700 or 800 people, they also love their study halls. They love interacting one-on-one and just having that option. And I think that's what we're saying here. It's like there's different fits for different people, but it comes back to, there's no way to even know what your fit is if you haven't gotten down to be honest with yourself and your family.
Right.
And ultimately that's the part of the process that I think is most beneficial for everybody. Because when everyone drops the ego and when everyone drops the pretense and we say, look, what do I really like? And what am I really scared of? Am I really scared of disappointing mom and dad? And even on the parent side, am I scared of disappointing my son or daughter? Because it's both sides. I don't want to disappoint my son, and yet we as parents have to discipline, we have to plan, we have to schedule, and we're always balancing that with feeling like, hey, we want the best for you, but this requires a lot of thought. And to be able to sit down and piece through that's where you get the honesty, I think. And not this pretense that, well, you should go to a Division I school, and well, you should go to the quote unquote highest academic institution. Lisa, I know plenty of guys that have never gone to school and have gone on to make wonderful lives for themselves. I know people that have gone to Division II, III, NAIA junior college. Talked to one today, this morning. He owns a series of title companies in Kansas. The Division I fit wasn't a fit for him. He didn't want it. Not only did he not want it athletically, he didn't want it socially or any other way. And until you get down to talking with the parents and the child and really getting honest, that's the first step, no matter what.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many components to the right fit from an educational standpoint, right? It's not necessarily only the reputation of the school or class sizes or what the social scene is on the campus, but things like making sure there are a variety of majors offered so that, even if your child goes into his or her freshman year saying, I'm majoring in, ABC, the likelihood is minds change during college,
Oh yeah, for
mature and
sure.
grow, and are exposed to more things. And, there are majors out there that a lot of kids have no idea what they are or that they even exist. And once they learn about them, then they want to have the opportunity to explore that. So, looking through the course catalog online, looking through the list of majors and minors available, looking at the graduation rates and do most kids graduate within 4 years, or are the majority taking 5 or even 6 years now to graduate? And what does that do to our family if our child can't graduate in 4 years? I mean, they can only play tennis for 4 years. That's it. Their eligibility is over and done with. And so what happens if they have to stay for that 5th year? How does that impact their life and your life as a family? These
Well,
are
and
all questions that need to be asked.
that's yeah, exactly. And you just prompted in my mind what we talked about in an earlier video, when we were saying, look, the official visits are nice, but the unofficial visits many times are where it's at.
Yeah.
Because when you get, and this is what's the beautiful thing about it, when you get everybody on the same page in terms of saying, look, we're committed to finding out what the best fit is, what the right fit is.
Mhm.
And then you start to assess finances, education, level of play, coaching, etc. You can do so much, because then you can set out and say, okay, look, maybe the amount you're playing in an academy is too much. Maybe you don't even need to be at an academy. Maybe we can tweak the scheduling of your play every week to not only save money, but to create time where we can draw out a radius and you can go visit unofficially 5 or 10 schools that you would have never visited before and talk to people. And this is at every Division 1, 2, 3 NAI. If you broaden your perspective and then you look within a 50-mile radius or a 100-mile radius, you're going to have a lot more options. And you can go to these places. People will share information if you're asking questions, and you can see what kind of majors do they offer. And I tell you this, throughout this whole process, I think the first person I ever helped was like 15, 16 years ago. Something is held true. When a child and a parent go to a place, they get an intuitive feel. And that
I was
intuitive
just getting ready
feel,
to say that there is a vibe on a
yes,
college campus. Yes.
yes, yeah, and there's a vibe there, and then there's the accumulated experience of the child and the parent for the last 8 to 10 years that have been in tennis and going through this process, and all these little categories and files, if you will, in their brain. Everything is there already. All the experiences, all the feelings of what's good, what's not good, what's right for me, what's not right for me. And you get that vibe of the place when you go there. And then that dovetails and mixes kind of like a recipe with intuitively all of your experiences. And I'm telling you, inevitably there are things that feel right and there are things that don't feel right. And if they don't feel right, you run like the wind. And if they do feel right, you can ask more questions. You can get more data and then go back and think about it. But then you have this process of elimination, and then you have this data set to call on and say, wait a minute, I remember that place felt really good. And you might not even know why, but I trust the intuition of the parents and the children. Because if it feels right, and then you have the data sets to go along with it, chances are it's going to be a good experience.
Absolutely. And through walking around these campuses, you get a sense of what the student population is. You get a sense of, how are people dressing to walk around? Do I feel comfortable? Does that fit in with what I want and what makes me feel good? And, how stressed out do people look? How much are they rushing? Or are there people sprawled out on the lawn, just taking in the weather and enjoying each other's company? And is that an important thing for me? And, we haven't really talked about this, John, but I think it's also important if a child is planning to go be a tennis player on a campus, you have got to go to some of that school's tennis matches and
Yep.
get a sense of what it feels like to be a student athlete on that campus. How much support is the team getting from the community? Are the stands full? Are the stands even situated in such a way that promote fan involvement in the team and in the whole process? And
Yes.
is
And
that
little.
important to you? And
Yep.
I'll tell an interesting story. I'm not sure I've ever shared this, but when my son was going through the process, the schools he was looking at, he knew he was going to be in the bottom three in the lineup. He knew, at schools he was considering, he wasn't going to go in playing in the top three. And so he looked to see where 4, 5, and 6 were playing. Where were the courts? Were there stands near the courts? Because he wanted me, when I came, and anybody else who came, to be able to sit where they could see him and he could kind of get the energy
Yep.
from the people in
Yep.
the stands. And I was so, kind of taken aback when he told me that he was looking at that. It wasn't a factor that I had thought about, but it made so much sense when he said it. So these
Yes.
are important things to look at when you go, and ask to see the locker room, ask to see where the team trains, ask to see if there's a team dining hall. Where is that? Where does the team study? Where does the team hang out before and after matches? I mean, these are all part and parcel, and I know this doesn't kind of fit into this topic of this
Oh,
video
I think it does.
fit, but
I think it
kind of
does.
sort of, yeah.
I think it fits. I think it's very apropos because this is you hit on kind of the main idea that we've been harping on for this entire video series, is that the most important component is the communication with parent and child, and then ultimately with the coach and the university, et cetera. But the most important bond is always parentally with the child. And like, there's so many bright children and there's so many good parents out there, and it's almost like Parenting Aces is a conduit and a facilitator to improve communication between parents and children and within the entire process. And I can tell you, the College Hunter, that's exactly what it is. You're a conduit to, at the very least, start communication and then facilitate communication, because it's amazing when people start communicating productively and with focus, they can figure the whole thing out. It becomes simpler than anybody ever thought, simply because there's honesty and there's clarity through the communication.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's a great way for us to wrap this video up, John. Educational fit, we're talking about finding the right program for your child across so many different factors. And in this video series, we're talking about 8 specific factors that we're going through. If people want to continue the conversation with you, John, we've got one more video in the series, but they can find you at thecollegehunter.com. And so I want to encourage all of the viewers to check out John's website. No pressure, just see what he's doing, and he is there for you if you have additional questions as you go through this process.
Yes, and I can tell you this, we give you guys a free 150-page book, and it's more about mindset. It's called Diaries of a Teenage Warrior, and it's the 10 top tools in developing the mindset of a champion. It's a mindset book, but you get a free book when you come there, and then you'll get access to a questionnaire. And I've had multiple people tell me that, hey, just going through that questionnaire has helped me clarify in my mind what we needed to do. Whether you come to us or not, and whether it's ever a right fit or not for you or for us, go through the questionnaire. I'm telling you, once you start thinking like that, and once you start evaluating your thoughts after you've answered all those questions, you may not need any more help than that. And all that is free. And that's why we set it up like that. We want to give away a book on mindset that I wrote that had been recognized by 3 presidents. We want to give that away. because that'll help the mindset process, which was our first video. We want to give the questionnaire away. We want to facilitate better and better thought process, because we know if the parents are thinking right and the children are thinking right, they're going to have that much better of a chance at getting the right fit.
Great. Well, John, thank you as always for video number 7. And for those of you watching, we'll see you in video number 8.
Thank you, Lisa.